Hi, I'm Tara Palmeri. I'm an investigative reporter with 15 years of experience covering President Trump. Yes, I have known him since I was 22 years old, and I was a young reporter for the New York Post, and he was a real estate tycoon on The Apprentice, a party boy. He would show up at events. I would be there too. I had his cell phone number, and I still do. I called him last week, and he answered. Yep, we talked. So I want to tell you what he really thinks about his own immigration policies and why he may be being pushed a little too far to the right by his own aide, Stephen Miller, the architect behind all of it, and the guy who really has a pulse on how MAGA is feeling about his immigration policy, how they really want everyone deported, all immigrants deported, even if they're keeping the U.S. economy humming and bringing in new research and innovation. How else do you explain President Trump's position switching on migration? At one point, he said, let's bring in the highly skilled H-1B visa workers. I have a ton of H-2B visa workers working on my properties, right? At Mar-a-Lago and all the other golf courses. He has tons of migrants who are not American working on his properties too. Let's deport the migrants, but wait, not the ones who work in hotels, restaurants, and farms. That's the latest. And then on Monday, he promised, don't worry, there will still be big, bad ICE raids, but they will only be in the Democratic cities. So there's a man behind all of it who is pushing him farther to the right. And it's a real conflict with Trump's own desire to be loved. And he sees that through his poll numbers. Take a listen to my reporting and analysis here with Democratic influencer Adam Mockler.
I am joined today by Tara Palmeri, a veteran journalist, often known as one of Washington's most fearless political reporters. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. What a kind intro. Some people might like that intro, some people might not, but I'm cool with being feared.
I want to talk more about that. You do or don't like being feared?
No, I'm cool with it. I mean, I obviously talk about it. I think like a big part of being a journalist is to kind of make the comfortable people feel a little bit afflicted, right? The powerful, and make sure that we're asking tough questions from people in power, no matter what side they're on, because we know absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we got to make sure that everyone's like held their feet to the fire, right? So it's something I love to do. And I was inspired by the Muckrakers when I was a kid, by their story of investigative journalism and really going like deep into really industries like the meatpacking industry, asylums, the clothing looms, and how like poor immigrants, much like the people that were my background, how they suffered because of the conditions. And there was really no one to speak out for them except yellow journalists. Now, Joseph Pulitzer, who's regarded as like the gold standard of journalism at the time, he was selling sensational newspapers called yellow journalism, kind of like the New York Post. But it's kind of funny how you look at it 100 years later, and so much of the advancements and the progressive movement really started there. So
it is interesting, and I've been following a lot of your reporting lately. I cited your story about Bill Gates visiting the White House in a video, and yeah, you're doing great work. I want to ask you some broad questions about your career, and then we can dig in and just have a conversation about the current admin. I know you have some questions too, but so I want to ask you, you covered the Trump White House during his first term pretty relentlessly. Yeah. Now you're here reporting on the second. How has the admin differed? What surprised you?
Well, they're just so much more professionalized this time around. There are very few dissenters. There are fewer people who are willing to speak out against him, even like privately, on background, off the record. They seem to really be towing the line. But I will say, when there are people who are unpopular, like Elon Musk, they were definitely willing to talk about that. But there are people who are trying to stop his worst instincts. Like, that's how other people thought of themselves as being inside the White House. They would be like, well, I'm here to be the adult in the room. You won't hear that word ever, I'm the adult in the room, from anyone. They enjoy not having adults in the room. And if anything, in any way being seen as trying to stop his agenda would be like a heresy. And so I think it's different. It's a little bit harder as a journalist, to be honest, to break stories, but Trump is leaky himself. Like, you can just call him and he'll tell you what's going on. there's really, and even the stories about like the absurdities and what he wanted to do, and oh my God, he wanted to send the National Guard, but he was stopped. Now he just does it. There's no one there to stop him. So whatever big scoop, I mean, probably one of the biggest scoops so far, I would say, is that Elon Musk was about to get a briefing on our war plans against China, and China is one of his biggest clients, right? So like one of our biggest scoops was about somebody other than Trump, and Trump himself was horrified by it.
Yep. I guess, do you think how do you view Susie Wiles' role in the administration? Because you were saying that there's not really an adult in the room, but I've thought of her as pretty clever.
Oh, she's clever? Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Is she an adult though?
Oh, she's absolutely an adult. I mean, but she's an adult who wants to survive.
Yeah. So she
imagine if you were an adult and your kids had knives and they were coming for you. What would you do to survive? You would give them ice cream all day long.
As many cookies as they want. Yeah.
Yeah, you become like the cookie. You suddenly open up an ice cream shop in your house to survive. So it's a different type of adulting, you could say. I mean, everyone says that she says the MAGA serenity prayer, accept the things I cannot change and know the difference. So there are times when she steps in and she tries to like intervene. And I know that with the Elon Musk case, she definitely knew when to step in and be like, okay, it's time to get this guy out of the picture. And she certainly helped move that along, but she wasn't protesting him the entire time. That doesn't really work for Trump because he kind of likes to pit his people against each other. So if he got the sense that Susie just didn't like him because of the power imbalance, or Susie felt threatened by him, or Susie felt that she wasn't able to express her ideas because of him, I don't think he would take Susie seriously. But when Susie can present the fact that I guess you could say, when she really chose the right moments to step in and make sure he became aware of things, like the China example, and say that story in the New York Times, that's real. Do you know what I mean? Like that, and then that pissed Trump off, and not just because it's a conflict of interest, but he's probably thinking to himself, Elon's about to make a ton of money off of that. And it's funny with President Trump, like I called him before I went independent, and I told him I was going to go independent. And he was just like, why would you do that? And he didn't understand it because he's such an old school guy. Like he used to read the New York Post and call me when I worked there, right? That was his favorite paper. We used to call him a rent-a-quote because you could literally call him for anything and everything. Or when I was on ABC News as a White House correspondent, like he was more aware of me then because he was always watching TV. But so to him, he's like, why would you start independent media? And I was like, well, like you had to give him like the numbers and like the figures and how people are blowing up online and like talk dollars with him. Like that's how his brain works. So she certainly understands like how to move him in the ways that others don't.
Yeah, I find it pretty fascinating. She definitely selectively shows her face. She's known for not really doing that many public-facing interviews, which is really unique for someone in the admin. I want to ask, how do you think?
Well, I think she does them when there's a bad story that's about to come out about her. And then she's like, I'll do an interview. And it's smart.
Yeah.
Because that kind of keeps you, there's a certain sense of scarcity around getting any quotes and comments from her. And then, she can use it when she wants to because it's hard to get her, she's exclusive.
So hearing you talk about your time at ABC and the New York Post, it makes me wonder, how do you think, since you know Trump and how he views a lot of these things, how do you think he views someone like Caitlin Collins, for example, who he's clearly combative with on camera? But part of me, I want to assume that Trump likes that game that he's playing, and he's playing that game intentionally, right? Can you explain to me what his philosophy is there?
She's a foil for him.
Yeah.
He needs someone to beat up on. I think there's a part of him that feels like he made her in some ways, and that kind of annoys him. He hates the idea of people becoming famous off of him. But I think there's a way he also respects her too. It's kind of and he's addicted to the media. Like he is addicted to the press. It is his heroin. I've heard this from multiple aides that work for him. I mean, I think from the fact that he just does not change his number and he keeps it open, and a lot of us journalists have it, and he'll take our calls. Like he's addicted to the media. So I think it kind of goes both ways, but he needs someone to beat up on. Like the mainstream media, they're the enemy, right? And who better than CNN? So that's my assessment on Trump's.
You know what I love about this? It's that it's kind of like, I view you as a veteran journalist who's really been in there, and I have so much to learn from you. And I'm just kind of dipping my toes in this new media space. And there's some like small things with online media stuff that I could probably also teach you as time goes on, and just more like branding
teach me some
stuff.
things. I would wonder what would you say off the bat, or is it something you'd rather tell me offline?
Let's talk about it after. Let me ask you one more question about your career.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about connections that you built in the first term and how you're now leveraging these connections in the second term? Because networking is something that I've been putting a huge focus on lately, and it pays dividends. So obviously you built a lot of great connections. How have you been now taking advantage of those connections?
Well, a lot of them I asked them to come on my show now, right? So I'm able to book some really great guests thanks to the connections that I've built over the 15 years of journalism. Because I'm still a little channel compared to you. I only started in March, but it's growing, and a lot of it is just inviting people on who I've known for a long time to debate and to come on and really just like take the hard questions. And I think that they know me through that. I think also a lot of people who work for Trump don't work for him anymore, but they have very close connections to the Trump administration, and they still talk to them. So they can often give me kind of information on what they see going on and what they're hearing. Often it's not necessarily like the direct source that gives you the tip. It's someone who's heard it from that person. And then you have to go in there and investigate yourself and try to get the direct source to confirm it. So that's just some basic like 101 journalism. But it's, and I've learned a lot about him and what to expect and what doesn't really shock me anymore. I think it's made me less reactionary. Some people want that. Like some people are saying to themselves, like, I want to go to a channel to feel with somebody, and maybe I'm not offering that in the same way that other channels do, but I'm kind of more thinking like I want to inform. Although I did feel like for the first time I wanted to put out a video about feeling, because when I saw that attack this weekend in Minnesota, I just was getting so angry because I just had a debate with Scott Jennings, who you see on CNN often. I know him well. He's another person I've known for like, I don't know, very, very long time, since he was a normie Bush Republican, right? Since he was calling for the whole party to get behind Marco and was blaming Trump for the insurrection. And he was like, the political violence is only on the left. And it just like blows my mind. It pisses me off so much because I'm like, stop. We have to stop playing this. It's the red team. It's the blue team. That's the violent ones. They're the ones who are breaking the rules and we're playing by the game. Like, no, it's happening on both sides. And I just hate how even the violence has become politicized. And I think that there are a lot of really dishonest politicians and online provocateurs who are just feeding up red meat and blue meat to people, and it's really causing a radicalization, and we need to turn the temperature down. And like I very rarely just like step in to like have an impassioned plea about how I feel about things, but I couldn't help myself. I was furious, and I just remembered the fight that I had with Scott, and of course like there were follow-up posts on it being like Scott Jennings owns lib podcaster. Like, first of all, like I don't really consider myself to be a lib podcaster. I'm like, sure, maybe compared to them, but to if you're on the spectrum, I really think I'm a journalist. But owns him on like political violence. It's on so much. It's like, stop it. That's not the fucking point. Like that's not the point of it. We're not supposed to be debating who's worse. We're supposed to realize, be reflexive and look within ourselves and think to ourselves, how we gotten to this point in America? A sanctuary of freedom and free press. Like, why are we like this? And the fighting about it, I don't think that's solving the problem.
I agree largely. I think that extremism exists on both sides. Absolutely. Especially right now. On the left, it feels like there is an increased tension with anti-Semitism, and it feels like people are being radicalized online. But the only part I disagree with is I just did a debate about this, and my main point was that it feels like on the right, it comes in a top-down way. Like even this morning, the president made this post saying that Democrats are sick of the mind and are intentionally destroying cities. And I feel like saying that 2 days after somebody kills 2 Democratic politicians just inflames it. And I'm not trying to do the thing where I immediately politicize it, but do you think it's fair to say that the president uses uniquely inflammatory rhetoric?
Oh, yeah. No, Trump has certainly created a situation in which the rhetoric is inflammatory, but like this, and actually in the past decade, death threats against members of Congress have increased twofold and their families. Like that is an alarming statistics. And we're coming up to like 10, a decade of Trump, right?
Yeah.
I think people feel more open and comfortable, expressing threats, but death threats and attempts, political violence has been happening forever. But yes, it feels really heightened. And his response does create permission structures, but it also riles up people on the left, riles up people on the right. I'm not going to squarely blame, though, President Trump for that, but I do think that was an astute point that it does seem to happen. The grassroots from the Democratic Party seem to be the ones that are really fomenting the anger, right? Whereas like the poobahs from the Democratic Party, like the Obamas and the Bidens and the Clintons, are like, let's condemn it. But the fact is that like most people, they don't have a lot of respect for those party leaders anymore. They don't really care for them. They don't think that they really represent the party. I mean, they were all at Huma Abedin's wedding with Alex Soros in the Hamptons this weekend with Kamala Harris. Like, this is the problem with the Democratic Party. I look at that story in the New York Times and I'm like,
yeah, okay. So people either think that that's representative of the party, or then they see the protesters who are sometimes not the protesters on like this weekend. I mean, the people who are super, super far left and give a bad name to the party, and they think that's representative. But the thing is, a lot of those like really, really far left protesters aren't even people that vote Democrat in the first place. So when I think of someone like Hassan Piker, do you know him?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. I've met him. I know him pretty well, but
I'm not like friends with him, right?
I think he's a cool dude. Like I know him on a personal level, but when it comes to like his politics, he doesn't tell his audience to vote for Kamala. He literally didn't even. I don't know how he voted. He never told his audience to vote for Kamala. Yet people think he's indicative of like the average Democrat in the party. The point is, some of our farthest left activists are kind of steering the optics of the party when they don't even vote Democrat. And then on the right, I think like 60% of sitting Republicans claim the 2020 election was stolen. Whether or not they actually believe it, I don't know. But a lot of them claim the 2020 election was stolen. So I'm not trying to do the whole thing where I make it like politicized immediately. But I just want to go back to the point of it feels like on the left, it is more decentralized and like far left people on the right. Yeah.
But I agree. But I don't think that like, I think that President Trump's rhetoric is completely, atrocious. But I do think the fomenting of the anger, like, I don't think he called on Charlottesville to happen, right? Like, I just think that's a reaction. I don't think January 6th was a protest. Then he said I don't think he called on what happened to happen. You know what I mean? He didn't condemn it. He certainly didn't stop it while it was happening. But
sorry to cut you off. If he never lied about the election, though, the election fraud, it never would have happened. So I would argue that he directly led to that. So like,
no, I agree. I agree with you on that. That's a bit more complicated, January 6th. But I think there's like the thing I don't like about this culture either is just like everyone's trying to own everybody. Yeah. It's like, why is this? Why can't we just like debate? And it happens on both sides. Like why does you have to own someone? Like why does someone have to win? Why do there have to be winners and losers in politics all the time? Why can't we just talk?
Yeah, that's been one of my philosophies. So a little bit about my career too. We talked. I've already learned a lot from you so far, which is amazing. So I've
learned a lot from you too.
I appreciate that. So I started when I was 21 years old, going to these Trump rallies. And I would go to Trump rally after Trump rally. After the first one went a little bit viral, I developed this strategy where I'd go in there and talk to Trump supporters in a very respectful way. And as much as I love Jordan Klepper and the content that he makes, but when he's making stuff for Comedy Central and dunking on Trump supporters, it's not as productive. So one of my most viral clips is a Trump supporter saying, "We should stop funding Ukraine. Let's put America first." And I go, I think funding Ukraine is how you put America first. I think when you fund Ukraine, you not only protect the border of sovereign nation, you're not only stopping Russia, but it helps our economy, our military, because we get to send old stockpiled equipment. And I give this argument, and this Trump supporter by the end of it goes, "I've never even thought of it that way. Maybe we should be funding Ukraine." Now, of course,
they're in information silos.
Exactly.
And they're not going to go into like they're not going to go into an environment that they feel like is unfriendly territory for them. a lot of people have confirmation bias. They want to hear from people who have the same worldview as them. They want to feel soothed. The world is scary and uncertain, and it's easier to hear people tell you how you should think rather than give you information and allow you to think more critically. And I think those are really smart questions and really smart presentations. And I think we kind of have, and that's what I'm trying to do. I do think it's hard because people are going to try to sniff you out for like, no. You have some sort of bias. You have some sort of agenda. You can't just be presenting for the sake of it. And there are also times where I'm like, this is messed up. And you know what? Maybe my take on it is not going to be the same as somebody else's. But that's, the fact that we are, it's interesting. Like that is one of the strongest points for that counters the America first idea about Ukraine or philosophy about Ukraine. Boeing, like you said, a lot of their factories are in South Carolina or red states, right? B, a lot of the artillery and equipment is too old for us to use, right? And that was actually that's what Speaker Johnson said.
Yeah.
He made the same argument. He said that as part of his legacy, he wanted to make sure that they passed the Ukraine funding bill, right? Then Trump comes into power. It's a totally different story. I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's so much dishonesty from our lawmakers. What do they stand for? I don't know anymore. Do they stand for anything?
Yeah, I don't know. And that's really disappointing because they're playing with lives in that scenario. I guess like the point is, what I started to learn is that if you talk to people in an empathetic way and you frame liberal issues or liberal beliefs, if you want to call them that, or just America First like beliefs like funding Ukraine in their rhetoric, like, yo, it helps you economically when we send this old stockpile military equipment and then we rebuild it in America. And when that clicks and you can talk with some empathy, I think that's how we regain a lot of the power and ground that we've lost. But honestly, the party right now is a lot of people are very finger waggy and they don't want to have these conversations. Like I had a comment one time, I made a video about Charlie Kirk, and the comment was like, Adam, don't give air to Charlie Kirk. And I remember replying like, Charlie Kirk is the air right now. He's 100 times bigger than I am. He's in the air. They have all the power right now.
He's very hot right now. Yeah.
So the point is, a lot of people on our side would rather shut down conversation or finger wag rather than take an empathetic approach. And I guess what are your thoughts?
I mean, I like the word empathetic because it suggests feeling, but it's not even empathetic. It's just critical approach. Yeah. It's just like thoughtful and open-mindedness. I do wonder, though, we're talking a lot about the right. Let's talk about the left for a minute. Like, do you think that there's an information silo on the left and that there's confirmation bias that the Democrats can improve before 2028?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially off the back of the last cycle. I see it a lot in my audience sometimes. I mean, the vast majority of my audience agrees with me on things, but there are information silos on the left. Whether you want to talk about the far, far left, I get accused of being a genocide supporter just for not taking a hardline stance and for having a nuanced position. So those information silos are very harmful. I think that on our side, a lot of people, I kind of call it blue anon. It's like the opposite of QAnon. So after the election, I was arguing with a lot of my fans about whether or not the election was stolen. But again, I don't know if this is broadly representative of the average.
But you thought that the 2024 election was stolen.
That's what I meant to say. Did I say 2020?
Do you believe that?
No.
Oh, okay. But there are blue anons that think that.
Yeah, I was arguing with my audience and trying
Even though President Trump won every single battleground state.
Well, to be fair, Trump claimed the same thing in 2020, but the Democrats, I don't know where they got this idea. They thought that Starlink stole the election somehow. Have you heard this?
No.
It was a random conspiracy theory that I saw online, and I did a live stream after the election. Everyone in my chat was floating it, and I had to push that away. So when I talk about information silos, that's what I think of. Like, why are these conspiracy theories? They exist on both sides. But is there something I'm missing? Where would you want to push back on what I said?
I just think that like he won so decisively on election night.
Yeah, of course.
I think that was a big part of it. And he was able to capitalize on the fact that it took 7 days to count the vote in 2020. But yeah, still, I don't appreciate, like, I think politicians using any sort of question or delay in vote counting we were also in COVID. So that's another reason why it took 7 days to count the votes, right?
Well, to be fair, though, sorry to cut you off, but to be fair, Trump, even before the election happened, said it would be the largest fraud ever seen.
Oh, yeah, no, he was setting the groundwork.
And then on election night, he declared victory early. He declared victory. And then remember, I think Mike Pence came up on stage and kind of meekly was like, we're still counting. But then Trump was declaring. So, okay, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. On the right, it's a top-down spreading of disinformation from Trump himself. On the left, there were decentralized election fraud theories in my audience that I saw, and I tried to shut that down to make sure that the information silo didn't exist. Now, to be fair, my content and its appearance and its content is pretty openly partisan towards the left. My content will be anti-Trump, pro-Ukraine, pro-democracy. But I try to give...
You were also pro-Biden when you started, right?
Yeah, I was pretty pro-Biden. I mean, I still think that Biden... I would still vote for Biden over Trump in 2020. Yeah.
In 2024, you mean?
In 2020, I meant. 2024, I would still vote for Kamala.
Yeah. Did you think he should have run for re-election?
I was supporting him, but I had questions. Yeah, I was kind of liking what Ezra Klein was saying early on when he said he's too old. But yeah, I don't know. It's obviously in hindsight, he should not have run for re-election. And I got swept up in thinking the incumbent advantage would just trounce everything else. But obviously, when the debate happened, it was a huge, like, holy shit, I didn't realize it was this bad.
Yeah. You didn't, like, from the videos that you saw too, though, you didn't think there's something off. You just thought...
Did you think the State of the Union, he performed well?
No, I didn't think he performed well at the State
Really?
of the Union. Yeah, I was actually on Bill Maher, and I said, and Bill Maher brought it up, and I was like, oh, he didn't sound like a zombie. He made it through an hour speech. Like, we can't be like just, giving claps to our president for making it through an entire speech where you're literally holding your breath the whole time, hoping he just makes it. And then Bill made a joke like, stop, no, we can't talk like that, Tara. We need to keep, that's all we've got. And that was sort of the feeling at the time, was like, don't even bring it up. Like, he made it through, but I felt like through his entire presidency, at least towards the end, every time he made a speech, you have to be like, is he going to make it through? Is he going to make it through? And that's just not the way it should be.
Yeah, he was fucking old. And honestly, that was an information silo that we should be calling out actively right now. If we care about the democracy, as people on the left, me, as a liberal, I care a lot about democracy. And if I want to be consistent, I should be actively calling out the fact that the Biden administration very, very clearly, I mean, there's arguments about to what extent.
But they bullied people. I don't like what they did to Robert Hur, who they said he was a special counsel.
Yeah, I read the Hur report.
Yeah, the Hur report. He comes out and he was like, they bullied him. They said that he was a hack after like months of propping him up and being like, he's an honorable man. That's why we made him the special counsel. I mean, after the report came out, it sounded like what Trump was saying about Robert Mueller, the way that they were attacking him and vilifying him on the left. Like the Jen Psaki's of the world, the Pod Saves of the world. Don't trust anything he said, because he said he was a well-meaning elderly man who couldn't get through the questions. And then you listen to the tapes and you're like, that was actually pretty generous.
Yeah. I mean, I remember reading the Hur report, and yeah, it was bad. Hearing the tapes were worse than we thought. When I first read the Hur report, I remember my main contention being, at some point in the interview when Biden walked in, Hur said, we don't expect you to remember everything. We're going to be asking you questions that span over decades. And then he started talking about how Biden had a lapse of memory. But I didn't realize how bad it was until we heard the reports. And yeah. So I guess going back to your original... I
didn't like how they attacked him over that.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to your original question about the information silos, and this relates to Robert Hur as well. I think I didn't bring this up because I wasn't thinking about it, but the biggest example of an information silo on the left would have been the 2024 election and Biden's age and everything. And that's something that needs to be called out, because we don't want to have the Trumpian sort of characteristics on our side. Yeah. Covering things up. And
like, if you're not with us, you're against us, right?
Well, no, what I find Trumpian about Biden's cover up, if you want to call it that, which I think you can, is that the 2020 election, Trump tried to hold on to power in any way that he could. This is how I view it. He used all the means at his disposal to try to hold on to power, likely due to his ego or his inability to accept a loss. That's how I view it. Biden seems to have kind of done something similar in 2024 due to his ego, due to his inability to back down. He also put us in a really, really rocky position. And honestly, it kind of, it was not good for the party for sure.
Yeah, not good for the country.
Yeah, I agree.
More so the party. And it's all part of the reason why people have lost trust in political parties. And I do think that there is an anti-establishment movement that's growing right now. And I think people who, this is part of the reason why I am the way I am, is I've always been a person who questions authority, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't really trust people necessarily. And I don't think they're always bad. Like, I think we need leaders, but they need to feel the heat of being held to account. And if we prop them up as like demagogues and people who can save us, I think we've lost the plot. You know, this is a democracy. This is not a monarchy, as they say, the No King's Parade. But let's make sure that that's true on both sides, and that people who want to rise up in 2028 to be, you know, Democratic challengers, and on both sides, and Republican challengers, that they know that they're going to face tough questioning. I think a lot of people are sort of enticed by the podcast route right now because they feel like it's an opportunity for them to talk about culture, and that's obviously, like, politics is downstream of culture, and to not have to take tough questions, and they can sort of, you know, like, show their lighter side, which people used to do on late night TV anyway, right? But I don't want them to fall into this trap where they avoid taking tough questions and like have to answer for it, because a lot of the people that want to run in 2028 were right outside, right in front of the cameras after that Biden debate, like Gavin Newsom saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes. He's amazing. He can jump, he can run, he can juggle." And, you know, Gavin was one of the people in 2022, in November 2022, I remember on Thanksgiving reading this, that he had met with Jill Biden and told her, I'm not going to run against him, against Joe. And it's like, you know, he's become one of the stars in the party because of the fights over immigration. But he lost a lot of credibility in my mind.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely not a good look, but it's totally, I don't mean to what about immediately, but Donald Trump was able to recover from a way bigger lie, in my opinion. And I know the Biden one is a little bit more fresh, but the American people seem to forget things decently quickly. I mean, Trump like cooed the Capitol, and it didn't affect people's day-to-day lives. So nothing really manifested from it long term. He regained power 4 years later. So I agree that Gavin Newsom, in the clips of him saying the Biden's fine, that's not a good look whatsoever. Yeah. In the same way that clip of Kamala Harris, the ACLU clip from 2019, where she's talking about trans immigrants in prisons, that came back to bite her in the ass. Maybe that's why Gavin Newsom is doing this podcast circuit, to try to flood the zone with clips of him saying more moderate stuff with Charlie Kirk or whatever, which could be a good strategy. But yeah, the loss of credibility was definitely part of the reason we lost. Huge reason.
Yeah, I think so.
Can I ask you a question? How do you view the Trump administration progressing over the next few years? Because we're 6 months into it, and I feel like it's been uniquely chaotic. And I'm not even saying that because I make liberal content. I just mean, like, I feel like if you look objectively at what's been happening with Elon Musk and Signalgate and the protests sparking, and then Trump saying this and that, I feel like it's uniquely chaotic. Do you view it as calming down, or do you think that maybe it'll be amplified by, like, if the economy starts to tank a little bit, I feel like all of these shenanigans and the Qatari jets aren't going to be fun and games anymore. How do you view things progressing?
I think that if he continues to be unpopular, he will get blown out in the midterms, and then he'll face impeachment, and he'll face a lot more resistance from the Democratic Party. People will talk more positively about the Democratic Party, because right now, obviously, there's a lot of, disappointment that they're not punching back hard enough, and that it's only the far left that seems to be really showing its might. So I do think that Trump will face more resistance as he tries to flex his power. I do think, though, that as he faces more resistance, he'll try to flex his power even more and more. He will try to defy the judiciary. He'll try to defy Congress. Obviously, even an impeachment, it probably won't pass through the Senate, because I don't think that the Democrats will take back the Senate in this next election just because of the map. But first, I certainly think that the Democrats will win in this midterm election in the Congress, in the very least. And even though they aren't campaigning on impeachment, it's absolutely going to happen. I actually think it's funny that, not funny, but it's interesting to see that impeachment is sort of like the dirty little word going on right now. Like, no one's saying it, but that's certainly what's going to happen. And I think the easiest thing to pin him for is the crypto money. And this whole blockchain thing and the dinner and how much money he's making certainly violates the emoluments clause, right? Maybe the jet from Qatar is involved in that as well, but that's a strong place to start. I also wonder if he declares a national emergency towards the end of his term, which for some reason would, I don't know, in some way push back an election or change the date of an election. I don't know if that's possible I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but you've seen it happen in Israel. You saw it happen in Ukraine, that, when they're in the middle of a war, they're able to move elections around. And so I wonder if he does that to try to stay in power for longer. I think it'll be interesting to see how JD Vance fares. Sounds like he's not willing to give him the endorsement. And I understand that, because he wants to hold on to power, be relevant. And if he's already endorsing his predecessor, it makes him look lame duck, right? But he also seems to like Marco Rubio a bit, and he likes to watch them fight with each other. I'm sort of curious, though, for you, do you think Trump's done anything positive since he was elected?
Has he done anything positive? Let me think on that for 1 second. I would say yes, he has, for sure.
Okay.
I think there are vacuums within the Democratic Party that he was able to fill, but he takes it way, way, way too far. For example, Biden's inaction on the border for the first 3 years, arguably 4 years of his term, led to this vacuum that Donald Trump was unable to fill. And now he's deporting people, I would argue, without due process, in an aggressive, reckless manner in certain areas. But I do think that his rhetoric had a solid effect. Like, he was trying to use preventative rhetoric, trying to stop people from coming over, and it's worked. We've seen crossings drop a lot. So if that's an end goal, then yeah, he did a really good job at doing that. I'm trying to think of other things. I'm sure there are, when we talk about the bill that's coming up, the entire bill isn't bad. I'm not going to write off the entire bill. It's okay if you want to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act so that people don't have a tax increase. But again, the contention is they kind of take it too far when they strip Medicaid away, or they target the House Energy and Commerce Committee to take money from, and that sort of redistributes it. So I'm not going to say that extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is bad in and of itself. That's not inherently bad. But the end result of what happens after that, I think, is kind of scary. In his first term, I know this is such a cop-out, but Operation Warp Speed was awesome.
Yeah, yes. He hates that, though. He'll never talk about it. The one thing. He got us a vaccine and, lickety split, right?
Yeah. Overall, I think he just oversteps. And I don't think that's even controversial that Trump takes aggressive actions. I think Trump even sort of admitted that himself a few days ago, and he was like, my great farmers have been calling me and saying that they're losing their best workers or whatever. So I just feel like, yes, he's done a good job in some places. I'm pretty firmly center left, so I'm not going to say that the entire bill is terrible, but the redistribution of wealth to the richest of the rich is not okay. Taking away Medicaid from vulnerable communities is not okay. There's a hidden clause in there that says you can't hold Trump admin officials on contempt charges, I think. Not okay. The climate initiatives that he's rolling back, not okay. I mean, I'll disagree with 98% of his stuff, but to say blanket that he hasn't done anything good would be very, very, like, I would be generalizing a lot.
Well, thanks for your honesty on that. I doubt you often answer that question.
I feel like I yapped and didn't really give you a clear thing. I'd have to think about it more.
No. You did, actually. You gave a lot of interesting points, and I agree with the deterrence at the border. Just the idea that if you show up, you're probably not going to stay. That helped to lower the numbers because immigration was a top issue for people. Why do you think, though, that the Democrats just left the border open for so long?
I reject the framing that the border was entirely open, but that's not even an important point to debate. I get what you're trying to say. Like, I think that here's my answer. When you see a clip of Obama in 2012 talking about the border, in a roundabout way, he actually sounds sort of a hard ass, kind of like Trump, but just without
he deported more people than Trump per day.
Yeah. But Trump uses more bombastic authoritarian rhetoric.
He started the family separation program.
Yeah. But the thing is, Obama doesn't go up there and say that they're all like rapists, murderers, and illegals. And Obama wouldn't use that rhetoric. And I'd like to think Obama at least still had a humane like view of these things. And then I think the Democrats were overreactionary to the Trump era. This would be my analysis on the spot. I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but this would be my analysis on the spot. When Trump comes into power and starts saying that immigrants are murderous, rapists, drug dealers, whatever you want to say, those overgeneralizations obviously just are not good. It's not good to dehumanize or to have an outgroup like that. And I think that Democrats took a reactionary stance and didn't really know how to reclaim that Obama era immigration rhetoric. Because then if Biden would have come out and used those Obama lines, people would have been like, you sound exactly like Trump, blah, blah, blah. So a combination of having Biden, who wasn't the best at articulating our beliefs during his term. I mean, he wasn't the best at defending his policy for obvious reasons. That combined with Democrats being a little bit reactionary after the Trump era aggressiveness around immigration.
Remain in Mexico worked.
Wait, say that again?
Remain in Mexico worked.
Yeah, it did.
And they stopped it in February 2021.
I also think that the border being open is kind of a red herring, though. Wasn't immigration across the planet kind of a mess during COVID and during the COVID years? Obviously, Biden could have used stronger rhetoric, but I don't know if they left the border open when a lot of the problem was asylum seeking, right? Which means people are going through the proper processes.
Right, but people get, it incentivized people to move to cross the border as well.
Yeah.
The fact that, people, they are aware of the president who's coming into office, their policies, and they make those decisions when they're deciding whether to come into the country or not. Right. But I do want to get back to this whole idea, though, about Trump being loved. He really does love being loved in the same way that he loves the press and would kill for fawning press. Like they used to print out. This is one of the first stories I broke when I was at Politico back in 2017. His team would print out positive stories about him and feed it to him every morning so that he had a positive mood, his positive media diet. And they would just show him it'd be like the Daily Caller or Breitbart, and it would make him feel really good. And someone that I spoke to this weekend who has known Trump for 2 decades, maybe longer than that, said, I bet this Stephen Miller policy on immigration is probably starting to irk him a little bit. That he doesn't there's a part of it that he likes. He likes the strongman, presentation. He likes to show that he's going into big cities and breaking up crime and keep, lawfare, this and that, keeping, keeping the streets clean. Even though honestly, I think it is actually, it's antagonizing people in a lot of ways. But when you hear him do the walk back on the immigrant farm workers, or you hear him do the walk back on the migrant farm workers, the migrant workers at hotels.
Yep.
I mean, I was looking at a story in the New York Times from, I think it was 2018, about the woman who was on an H-2B visa, who had been cleaning, she was his personal maid for decades. And he hires these people at his properties, Mar-a-Lago, Bedminster, all of his properties. They are run on the backs of migrant workers. And I think he's conflicted on this one as much as he wants to seem like a hardo. And I think he's pushed by Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, and then he has to walk it back, like you saw. And he realizes that what we really need is immigration reform. And unfortunately, there is no one in this Congress that has the backbone to do it, at least on the right, but even on the left too. I mean, they have certain demands that the right won't agree to. And I think that meeting in the center is just something that no one is really willing to do. Maybe a small amount, but that doesn't make a majority, right?
Yeah, I entirely agreed with your analysis. I think until the point where you said he realized that we need immigration reform. I do think Stephen Miller is pushing him to be more hardline on immigration than he actually is. We see that with a lot of issues, but I don't even know if he cares about immigration reform. Obviously, the argument would be that he shot down, or he got Congress to shoot down Lankford's bill back in 2023, was that?
Yeah, a political tactic so that he could be reelected, right?
Yeah, I don't think he cares about reform. I actually would argue that Democrats care more about reform. And here's the thing, just to really quickly back up and clarify. I am okay with deporting people if they are a criminal and if they're here illegally and they've committed crimes repeatedly. Of course, I'm not going to push back against that. Deporting criminals, like people who have genuinely committed crimes, is fine. But I think like the removal of TPS from people when you promised you wouldn't do that, or I think that like going into some of these more people that are just working, genuinely just trying to work and make a living, I think that's when it starts to step over the line. So I want to give a nuanced position there and say that, like, as a Democrat, I'm okay with the deportations, of course. But going back to Trump being pushed a little bit too far, yeah, I think that Stephen Miller is influencing his policy in a way that's making him more unpopular. And it's interesting. Sorry, what's up?
No, I was just thinking the same thing. And he likes those poll numbers. Like,
yeah, and I was right about to say, immigration, or at least the border, was the one thing he was above water on in almost every poll, and now there are polls showing that he's below water. So I've heard theories that he could use Stephen Miller as a scapegoat and push him out. I don't quite know if that's going to happen. I know Trump does like to do that with some people. What do you think?
Stephen's been around for a while.
So he wouldn't do that?
It's over a decade now.
Okay.
And Stephen is the MAGA right loves Stephen.
Yeah.
And he's playing a dance right now because I think at the same time, the reason you saw him even kind of like do this dance where he's like, I'm going into big cities and I'm busting up big cities, but I'm going to keep the farm workers because that's the red state flyover people. You know, that's a reaction to the right freaking out about him saying we're going to keep certain H-2B workers or migrant workers. So he's playing a delicate dance. I don't think he will ultimately get rid of Stephen Miller because he is an icon to the MAGA right. I mean, Trump was a Democrat at one time, right? Yeah. I wonder sometimes what he even thinks about someone like Pete Hegseth removing Harvey Milken's name from a warship, you know, a decorated naval officer. It's just like, you know, Trump in his day used to hang out, like Roy Cohn was his boy, and he was openly gay.
He was kind of openly gay. He was kind of closeted, though.
He was a little closeted, but it just, I mean, you know what, though? People, when they get older, they get really conservative, too. So I can't say, oh, just because he was like that in the 80s and 90s, he's the same guy today.
I think, so you know him better than I do, obviously, but I think Trump, like in a personal sense, too, I think Trump is fully bought in on a lot of the cultural stuff today. I think he thinks like trans issues have gone too far, in the universities are really like leftist right now. I think
a lot of people would agree with him on the trans issues have gone too far thing.
I think when he tweeted today, the Democratic politicians want transgender for everyone. He's obviously using inflammatory rhetoric, but he thinks that it's like a massive, massive issue. And yes, you can argue that in certain areas, the trans issues went too far, but Republicans also blow it the hell up.
Oh, like, yeah, it's a 2080 issue or 1090 even.
Which part of it?
Like, I think 10% of Democrats are really that worked up about it.
Oh, yeah. I think that, so a good example that I give is Sarah McBride, the transgender congresswoman who came in. She had this philosophy: I want to keep my head down. I don't really want to make my identity a part of my, you know, political career that much when I'm in Congress. But right as she came in, Republicans introduced this bill about her, kind of just like micro-targeting her.
So nasty.
And what it did is it blew it up into this national cycle. And I know like Fox News people, I grew up in Indiana, so I know Fox News people that just know a lot about Sarah McBride for some reason. And I'm like, why are you, like, go enjoy Father's Day. Why are you thinking about Sarah McBride today? So I feel like Republicans planted in people's heads. But yes, a lot of Democrats bit the bullet. But this goes back to what we were saying earlier. I think it was more like Democratic, like, not even Democratic far left activists who were pushing the party rather than, I don't know if Biden in a top-down way was taking it too far, but I guess I've heard the argument that he was doing meetings with trans activists that people think was that were unacceptable. But going back to the point, what was the point I was making right before I got sidetracked?
The Trump is not that he.
This
really
is what
is,
I think.
yes.
Trump is bought into a lot of the social stuff. He thinks that Democrats are super woke and that college campuses are taken over by radical people. And you can argue if that's true or not, but I don't think he cares if someone's gay. I don't think Trump cares if someone, obviously not. I actually don't think he cares if someone's trans. I know he's friends with Caitlyn Jenner, but I think he just does it to amass, obviously, the power base and to shift the culture over. But yeah, overall, I think he's pretty bought in. He's a true believer on some of it.
Some of it. I think some of it he knows is red meat.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
He's an entertainer at the end of the day.
You know that one clip where he's like, every time I talk about trans issues, the crowd goes crazy, but then I talk about the economy and no one cares, or he says something like that. So he knows.
The guy stays up all night thinking about Shark Week, okay?
Yeah.
I think that's all you need to know. Shark Week, his mind is cable news, Shark Week, Hannibal Lecter, electric boats, windmills, golf.
Yeah.
Rinse and repeat.
And a little bit of Joe Biden. He thinks about Joe Biden a lot.
He used to think about Obama a lot. He doesn't like to be compared to his predecessor.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I'm a competitive person, especially when I'm in a field and I have competitors. I get the competitiveness for sure. But
can we jump off so I can get some of your tips? I've been dying to hear from that. Get some from you because you're a killer in this game.
Let me do a quick outro. It was great chatting with you, Tara. Let's chat more. You know what I liked about it is that we both learned from each other, but we were also kind of pushing back on each other. It's always a good vibe.
I prefer to have a little debate.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? I like to sit across from someone and feel like I've learned something from them, and maybe they've learned something from me, and we can all just kind of step away from it, not being like, I owned him, he owned me. It was just like, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way, and I'm happy that I did.
Great conversation. Let's do it again.
I would love that. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Tara Palmeri Show. I want to thank my producer, Eric Aminate, my booker, Jane Fusco, my team of researchers and social media. That's Abby Baker, Luke Radel, and Sarah Carney. I'll be back again this week, but you can always find my reporting by going to tarapalmeri.com. That's TARAPALMERI.com, and signing up for my newsletter, The Red Letter, where you will get my exclusive reporting straight to your inbox. See you again soon.